Hello, hello, hello. Happy Easter. Hope you're having a good time. Hopefully you've had a few days off and you're figuring a little bit of time for sewing. Okay, week 10, can you believe it? Here is one of your blocks for week 10. Now, it is really similar to the one we did last week, except it's got 4 strips instead of 3. And you'll notice half of it is my fabrics for all of my blocks. The other half is my background fabric, which in this case I'm using this sort of off-white cream for my Tilda version. Now that block will probably take you all of about, 10 minutes. And most of that will actually be time selecting your fabrics. So really quick block. These make fabulous quilts. If you pop them, you make a whole heap and put them together and you can rotate them around and get really interesting designs. Nice block for using up your bits and pieces. The next block we're going to do is called apple pie. Yep, I'm getting hungry. Now, this block should look slightly familiar. The center section is the same as the monkey wrench block that we did, also called churn dash. We've got the strips on the sides and the square in the middle. What is different about apple pie is we're doing some flying geese. So these go in the corners. Now, you may have made flying geese before. You can make flying geese by cutting individual triangles and sewing them together. Or you can make flying geese using the stitch and flip method. Now the method I'm going to show you for this block is called the make 4 at once method. And if you've got to make 4 flying geese the same, it's the really good method to use. In this case, we're making 8 flying geese, so we will do 2 of the make 4 at once method. Hope that makes sense. Now, you have to follow along to this because every time I show this technique to people, they look at me as if I'm going crazy and say that won't work. So just take it on faith that this is going to work. So in your pattern instructions, you will have instructions to cut a square of fabric from one of your prints and a stack of smaller squares. So the first thing we're going to do, I hope that light isn't too glary there, is we're going to lay 2 of our smaller squares in each opposite corner. And we're really matching up these edges. Now this method will create an oversized flying geese that you will be trimming back, which does help with accuracy. Now, you'll notice I've drawn a pencil line from point to point. Now I hope you can see that. I did kind of go over it again. And then I have sewn 1/4 of an inch on either side of that line. Same as we do when we're making half square triangles. So that's stage 1. So we've got 2 squares and yes, they do overlap. So hopefully you can see there. Ooh, that light's a bit leery. Hopefully you can see there where the point is, where they overlap. That's really important. Okay, the next thing to do is to cut them apart. So you can either use scissors, your electric cutter, and you're going to have 2 pieces that look like this. The next step is you're going to press those triangles open, and it looks like a little love heart. So you'll end up in the make 4 method, you'll have 2 of those. Oops, that does not want to flip open. So you'll have 2. Now you can either press these open or you can press to the side. It's really personal preference which way you press them. You might, I'd suggest making a sample first and press them towards the small triangle fabric and see whether you like it. Okay, so there's my first little heart. This one needs to be pressed. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take now one more square and I'm going to put it in that corner. So the edges are really lined up across there, and it should overhang and make a little point there. So I'm just going to make sure that is all really lined up. And now I'm going to draw a diagonal line. Oops. From corner to corner. So hopefully that is coming up in the video. So one diagonal line from corner to corner. Okay, I'm going to pause the video while I go and sew a 1/4 inch either side of that. Okay, through the magic of technology, my lines are now sewn. And what you'll notice is that, see how I've got these V's here? See how my stitching line comes right up to the bottom of that V on both sides, with my 1/4 inch either side of the pencil line. Now, I'm again going to cut those apart along my pencil line. And when I press that back, I'll just finger score it here. I have my first flying geese, or goose. There's my second one. And then from this one, I will do the same. Once I've pressed it, I'll take one more square, stick it in the corner, match up those edges, draw my line, stitch either side, and then cut it apart. And I'll have 2 more flying gooses. So that's why it makes 4 at once. Now, I'm just going to whip over to the ironing board and give this a press before I give it a trim. Okay, given these 2 little guys a press I mean, and now I'm going to give them a haircut. Okay, so what you'll notice is because these are actually oversized using the measurements I've given you to cut the fabrics, I don't know if you can see there, but where that V comes up, it is about 3/8 of an inch away from the edge. And we want a distance from that point there to the edge of our fabric of 1/4 of an inch, so that when we sew them together, that little V matches perfectly with our next piece. So the first trim I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ruler onto my piece, and I'm going to use my 1/4 inch line and put that right where the V is. So I'm going to trim off about 1/8 of an inch. And I'm also checking that I'm cutting that square. So I'm checking with my other lines and my ruler that my ruler is nice and even with the edge. Okay, there's my first cut. So the top of my flying geese, or goose, is now 1/4 of an inch above that V point. So now I've got my first line in place. I'm going to do my next cut, which is to make it 2 inches wide. So just line the top of my ruler up. So now it is 2 inches wide, and now I need to make the length the correct length. Now, 3.5 inches should be a number that you know very well from a lot of the blocks. And by some strange magic, if I put my ruler on there, I can see that from the seam on both sides, it is actually 3.5 inches wide, the grey part. So I'm lining up my ruler to trim 1 3/4 inches either side of that centre V. Oops. And there is my trimmed up flying goose. So all this will be in the instructions, but a video says 1,000 words. The main thing is your first trim is across the top, so that you're trimming off 1/4 inch above that little V there. That's your first trim. Your next trim is to trim the width of it, or the depth of it, to 2 inches, and then we're trimming off either side to make it 3.5 inches wide. And all things being equal, when that is correct, these points will come, these seams will come right out to the 2 corners on either side and give you a perfectly sized flying goose. So I'm going to repeat that again on this one. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm lining up my ruler with 1/4 inch line through the top V. Oops. Yeah. Here we go. Rotating it round 180 degrees. Trimming my flying goose. Oops. To 2 inches. And then I'm measuring 1 3/4 from the V. And I'm double checking that where my seam comes out, my diagonal seam, is right on the edge of my ruler. Now I would suggest making up a few of these out of some scrap fabric, just so you can see how they go together, because it is an interesting method to use. So now I've got 2 of them. I will sew them right sides together. And when I open them, I'll have my 2 flying geese. Now, part of the reason why I like pressing my flying geese towards, they call this the sky fabric, the tiny triangles, is that I can then see when I'm sewing them together, I can see that V right there, the seam lines. So I can, as I'm stitching along, I can make sure my needle is dropping just onto that so that I get a perfect point. Now I'm going to go sew these 2 together and then show you the finished unit. Okay, there is my completed flying goose unit. Oh, I love these. So you can see on my stitching, I have stitched right through that point there, just touching it, so that when I open it up, I've got a lovely point there. Okay, so hope you had fun making these. We will be making other blocks later on using flying geese, where we'll actually be making one at a time. So this is a good introduction to making 4 at a time flying geese. Okay, bye.